Hi and welcome back to a new video here on my channel. You can see a case next to me which will certainly remind you of the O11 Dynamic just by looking at the picture itself. We have an Intertek C-701 Panorama. I'm not sure if this case is available like globally, but I found it in Germany for €80 because recently there was a discussion going on my Discord server regarding the O11 Dynamic and copies which kind of existed afterwards, like a few years after this case has been on the market. Obviously, it's been a huge success for Li&Li, and that's why I guess a lot of other manufacturers are probably trying also to make a good copy out of this and maybe also try to sell some cases. First of all, I don't really care how many of those cases Li&Li is selling because I don't participate in this. I mean, I have my label in there, but I don't really care about that. So then I still thought about how's the quality of those copies? And I pretty much ordered every single copy I could find out there. We're starting off with the Intertek C-701, which is about €50 cheaper than the O11 Dynamic. And €50, that is quite a big deal, I would say. This one is available in Germany for €80. And we will check out how good this copy is and which might be better or might be worse regarding the O11 Dynamic. Let's find out.
C-Sonic, the heart of your system.
First impression, I mean, it looks very similar to an O11 Dynamic. And black is also always quite difficult for filming with all those reflections on the tempered glass and stuff. That's why we will first start off with just removing the tempered glass side panels and also peeling off the foil and check out if there are any damages to the glass or anything I can spot. Just for transportation and shipping itself, those kind of protection covers made out of plastic on the corners of the glass, they are already a good feature. Time to criticize the first point. And that is something which I've also seen on the O10, which the O11 was based on. And that's the way the tempered glass is attached to the case itself. It's exactly the same way it was attached on the O10. You have those rubber feet on here with a thread inside, and then you have those tiny aluminum screws, should be M2.5 or M3 thread. And that is also the weakness of this solution, because if you attach this screw 3-4 times, I guarantee that the thread will wear out. That's always what we had with the O10. Plus, you have those holes inside the glass and they're like a weak spot in the glass, and that makes the glass much easier to break. That's something that was changed for O11 Dynamic, which is still the case here, but this is also the much cheaper way of making it. So that is one way to save costs on the design. One more difference is the front panel itself. On the O11 Dynamic, this would be the front I/O area. You would have your power button, you would have your USB connectors and stuff. On this Intertek case, we just have a blank, just a blank panel on here, and which is not really that bad because the entire front is made out of glass. This part right here will also cover this part, and because there is a black paint behind this, it doesn't really look bad. I kind of like this solution. If you want to open the side panel, this is not a toolless design. I mean, even though it looks like a thumb screw, you will need a screwdriver to open the screw. It's very tight and you have no grip on it. Material-wise, this thing is entirely made out of steel, and except for the front panel and also the side panel. And that's also one way where you can save some of the costs. The O11 Dynamic was featuring an aluminum front, which isn't that much of a cost, but they were definitely saving some cost right here on the steel itself. On the O11 Dynamic, they were using 1mm thick steel, and right here, if I measure it, it's 0.84. Keep in mind that it's painted, so it should be 0.75 to 0.8mm steel, which will make it a little bit less stable, which is fine. I mean, in my eyes, it's still a thickness which is okay. It won't give you as much stability as the O11 Dynamic, but then on the other hand, you're building a PC once and then it's just hanging on your desk. You don't put a ton of force on it, so this should be still fine. On top, we have the I/O area. As I said before, that's different from O11 Dynamic. It's not in front, it's on top. Starting off with the power button, it feels good. It has a very good feeling to it. If you touch it, it has a cheap sound, which comes from the case itself, but I think that's okay, but has a very good feeling just switching it on. Then switching over to the reset and the other button, which doesn't make any sense. If you want to press the reset button, you have to press it extremely deep, which is a little bit inconvenient, but regarding that, hopefully you don't need reset that often. I think it should be fine, and you're probably not gonna touch it accidentally this way. But this other button, the RGB button, doesn't make any sense. If you just take a look at the cable itself, It's just a 2-pin connector that says fan on it. Not sure what this button is for, but this button, it makes no sense, this button. And regarding the connections, we don't have USB Type-C, which I'm kind of missing, but I guess that's fine for the price. We have dual 3.0, dual 2.0, and then the audio connectors. But what I kind of also dislike is the marking. I don't need to see like 2.0 or 3.0 next to it. That's kind of ugly. That's not necessary. It would make a much cleaner look if this was missing. The general dimensions, this one is also smaller than O11 Dynamic. It's about 4 centimeters shorter in this dimension. It's about 2 centimeters left in that dimension, which makes me a little bit worried regarding the GPU clearance, which is already not perfect on the O11 Dynamic. But we will find out what the spacing on this will be once I build a system in there quickly. It's also a little bit higher. It's about 6 millimeters higher. So yeah, in general, it's a little bit less material they have to use. That's also a way to, again, reduce your cost further. Just starting to set in some of the hardware, and then I noticed that there are several holes in the case which will not be closed, which is not dramatic, but it's certainly like a manufacturing aspect and also a quality aspect. But you have like a hole here, here, and there. As I said before, it's not a dramatic issue. It will not cause any problems, but it's certainly also a quality thing, but probably also saving some costs in production, I guess. If you check out the description of the case in several stores, they're all advertising 360 radiator mounting spots for like top, bottom, and the back. Right here we have a Corsair H150i, the recent RGB AIO whatever from Corsair. And that's the one I'm just going to use for clearance testing. And now just pay attention to this tiny shiny thing in the back of this case in the corner, because that is a rivet right there. And if you try to mount this radiator, that is exactly what's happening. It's colliding with the rivet and you're missing like 1 or 2 millimeters. And that's something that should absolutely not happen. That only happens if you don't test your product prior to production, because that is just 1 or 2 millimeters of clearance that is missing to mount this radiator. You will also face the same kind of clearance issue if you want to mount your custom water cooling radiator, simply because they're even longer, because like the AIO radiator is typically like 2 or 3 millimeter shorter than a custom water cooling radiator, because this one needs more space for like the G1/4 thread connector for the connection panel, and that's what you are missing on an AIO radiator. That's why they're typically a tiny bit shorter than the custom water cooling radiators. That's why I don't think that you can fit any like custom water cooling 360 radiators on top or bottom, because they will collide with those rivets. You can obviously just kind of like drill out the rivets and replace them with screws. This way, if you want to do some modifications, you can certainly make 360 radiators fit. Otherwise, 240 will fit in top and bottom, but 280 is also not going to fit. If we want to stick with a 360 AIO anyway, because we might have purchased it anyway, then this is the only position we can use. And this position will also work out, as long as you don't have any fans in the top. Because you will see that those fittings, or like the tubing right here, if you would want to have another like 3 120 millimeter fans on top, it would collide. You can have 2 more, but 3 would not work out. Also keep in mind that it's extremely tight right here. And that is because we're having 4 centimeters less in length, as I said in the beginning. And yeah, we kind of miss those a little bit here, because it's getting really, really tight in between there. Especially keep in mind, like I don't have the fans on here right now because I'm lazy, but if you would add the fans, then you would have even less space just to squeeze your like 24-pin cable through, because this way, like if the fans are missing, you could like squeeze it in here. But if the fans are standing out, you would have to extremely bend the 24-pin cable to get it back through here. It would work, but it wouldn't look nice. The best way, however, is just to move the radiator to the back after you squeeze your pump head through there, which is a little bit weird, but it worked out. And this way you could either decide to put your fans on there, or you could technically even go for a push-pull configuration, and this will also give you much more clearance to the top to also have 3 120 millimeter fans on top. No matter what you do with this case, I would absolutely recommend to always have 3 120 millimeter fans on here or a radiator, because otherwise you will always see those cables hanging down from the AIO panel, because they just hang right in there. And the only way to hide it is either have your radiator in front or like 3 fans, which will make it look much nicer. Also keep in mind there's nothing to hide your cables if you look in from the side. That's another like indicator or reason why you should have your fans in front, while you kind of squeeze your cables through here, because there are like no rubber parts which are hiding your cable management behind that. One of the biggest issue, as I thought right from the beginning when I saw the dimension of like 60mm shorter here than the O11 Dynamic, is the fact that you will have clearance issues with VGA. On the O11 Dynamic, you have a dimension right here from the PCI Express slot to this size of 155mm, which works out in 99% of the cases. Any stock card will fit. If you have, for example, a Strix with water block, it can still collide on the O11 Dynamic because it's not the biggest case. There are other cases meant for that, but if you use any stock VGA, it will definitely fit in the O11 Dynamic. On this case right here, if you have any like a Strix card or like a Kingpin, a Hall of Fame, any like massive card or like an AIO cooled card, you will encounter issues because you're missing 15mm in clearance right here. It's only 140mm in length. And you can see that right here. I mean, it's just closing in with the card, which is fine. I mean, this looks like you can get the glass panel back on, but then you should not forget about the cables, because those cables, no matter how you're going to squeeze them on here, they will collide with the glass panel, and this is not going to fit. The space or clearance in the second chamber looks sufficient. We only have the opportunity to mount one PSU, which I think is totally fine. I don't consider the second PSU as an essential option. It's just a feature which is okay to have, but 99% of the people will never use it, as far as I know. And I mean, you can mount a 1600i AX Corsair PSU on here, which is quite massive, and you have enough space. That is cool. You can also mount dual SSDs above, and in general, there is enough space to just squeeze all your cables in there. That's why I don't really see like a lot of issues on the backside. Even though the total height of this case is slightly higher, it's still lacking a little bit of space underneath right here. Because if you have more space underneath from the feet, then it will make the intake much easier. You will allow the case to breathe better, and it will lead to better temperatures, but that also depends on if you will have like fans on there or your fan configuration in general. But just looking at this case overall, it's not a bad case, especially considering that it's only €80. And if you buy a case like this for €80, you're probably not going to put like a €1,000 custom water cooling in there. And by that, I just mean the custom water cooling components, not the hardware itself. And keeping that in mind, that this is probably just like a budget case, which still looks nice. I think they did a pretty decent job. The only thing which annoys me about such products is the fact that they're not testing it properly before. Like the thing that you're lacking like 1 or 2 millimeters on top, there's like no excuse for not testing this. Because if you would have mounted just any Corsair AIO on top, then you would have noticed that it's not going to fit like the way I did it. And just changing a dimension by 1 or 2 millimeters is not that much of a job. That's why just if you copy stuff, then just do it right and make sure you test it before you sell it. And if you neglect those parts, like those tiny mistakes, for like a budget case, it's not a bad case. Just keep in mind that you will have clearance issues with big GPUs, and you will most likely also have clearance issues with big CPU coolers. But I mean, like the big GPU and big CPU coolers will probably only be used for like more expensive systems, and in this regard, it will probably work out in most of the cases, like literally. All right, it's not a bad case for €80. We will continue in the next video with the next copy. If you have more, or if you've seen more O11 Dynamic copies out there, feel free to link them down below. I still have, or I already have 4 other cases here, but maybe I missed one and didn't see it. Feel free to link it down below. Well, actually, don't link it. Actually, put the name down below because links are blocked on my channel. All right, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye-bye.